Welcome to the What the What podcast, the podcast where we tell you what's nerdy, what's popping with culture, what's giving us all the nostalgic feels, and what's there to geek out about, past, present, and future. It's all the what's in one place. I'm Ashby Brame, and joining me today, now that they're done looking at my shoes and asking, what are those? It's Eric Creech and Kyle Whitley.
Seriously, what are those?
Look, they're sandals.
Wakanda forever!
They're comfortable.
You had to keep with the tradition.
You know what I call these? Sneakers.
We're here.
We are here.
I don't know what else to say because I'm just like, oh, that's a Black Panther reference. That's good. I forgot about that, and that's funny. But then, if you're here, you know that this is the Black Panther episode, so you should be expecting that we'd be quoting Black Panther today.
Yes. Well, in times of conflict, okay, the foolish build barriers, okay, but the wise build bridges.
That's right.
So let's build a bridge here, and let's just get over the awkwardness of the beginning of the episode.
Okay.
So if y'all are cool with that, we can move on.
Sure.
Cool. How y'all doing, folks?
Doing good.
Hope y'all doing good. Glad to have us here. We're recording on a Saturday morning again.
Ashby got us coffee.
Finished all of it, too, which
Our
is
new
incredible.
normal.
Our new normal, yes. And we're super excited about this podcast. It's another broken podcast for us to fix. This is going to be fun. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever it is you get your podcast. And, of course, rate and review us. We take 5 stars only. And I did the 5, symbol with my hand, held up 5 fingers, even though none of y'all can see it. This was just for you two.
I did it. I did it as well.
Imagine.
Well, now I'm doing the 4 horsemen.
And then I did the John Cena can't see me.
Where did Kyle go?
I'm back.
Okay, thank goodness. Please also follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at What the What Media.
All one word.
And find us on Twitter at WTW_media. Please share it with your friends if you enjoyed today's episode or one of the 98 other What the What episodes that we have available in the archives. Yes, this is episode number 99. And on today's episode, we are taking a
Deep dive
into 2018's Marvel's MCU's Black Panther.
So excited.
Yes, this is your spoiler warning. While Black Panther is our primary focus, we may be diving deep into the MCU, including all now 24 MCU films,
Yes.
MCU television shows, and the comics source materials that inspired this wonderful film franchise, taking into account the entire saga from the moment Iron Man's Humvee got attacked all the way to the present moment.
That's right.
With that being said, let's grind up the heart-shaped herb, have some for ourselves, and let's tell everyone what happened.
Okay. Thousands of years ago, 5 African tribes war over a meteorite containing the metal vibranium. One warrior ingests a heart-shaped herb affected by the metal and gains superhuman abilities, becoming the first Black Panther. He unites all but the Jabari tribe to form the nation of Wakanda. Over centuries, the Wakandans used the vibranium to develop advanced technology and isolate themselves from the world by posing as a third world country. In 1992, Wakanda's King T'Chaka visits his brother N'Jabu, who is working undercover in Oakland, California. T'Chaka accuses N'Jabu of assisting black market arms dealer Ulysses Klaue with stealing vibranium from Wakanda. N'Jabu's partner reveals he is Zuri, another undercover Wakandan, and confirms T'Chaka's suspicions.
So I'm going to read this little next part, but I'm going to leave blanks and let you guys say the names because...
Okay.
I'll be honest, I'm going to screw him up and really do it right.
That's
In
fair.
present day, following T'Chaka's death in Captain America Civil War, his son T'Challa returns to Wakanda to assume the throne. He and Okoye, the leader of the
Dora Milaje.
regiment, extract T'Challa's ex-lover
Nakia.
from an undercover assignment so she can attend his coronation ceremony with his mother
Ramonda.
and younger sister.
Shuri.
At the ceremony, the
Jabari.
Jabari tribes leader
M'Baku.
challenges
T'Challa.
for the crown in ritual combat. T'Challa defeats
M'Baku.
and persuades him to yield rather than die.
It's like Mad Libs.
Like Mad Libs, thank you.
When Ulysses Klaue and his accomplice Eric Stevens steal a Wakandan artifact from a London museum, T'Challa's friend and Okoye's lover, Wakabi, urges him to bring Klaue back alive. T'Challa, Okoye, and Nakia travel to Busan, South Korea, where Clow plans to sell the artifact to CIA agent Everett K. Ross. A firefight erupts and Clow attempts to flee, but is caught by T'Challa, who reluctantly releases him to Ross's custody. Clow tells Ross that Wakanda's international image is a front for a technologically advanced civilization. Eric attacks and extracts Clow as Ross is gravely injured protecting Nakia. Rather than pursue Clow, T'Challa takes Ross to Wakanda, where their technology can save him.
While Shuri heals Ross, T'Challa confronts Zuri about Ninjabu. Zuri explains that Ninjabu plan to share Wakanda's technology with people of African descent around the world to help them conquer their oppressors. As T'Chaka arrests Ninjabu, the latter attacked Zuri and forced T'Chaka to kill him. T'Chaka ordered Zuri to lie that Ninjabu had disappeared and left behind Ninjabu's American son to maintain the lie. This boy grew up to be Stevens, a Black Ops U.S. Navy SEAL who adopted the name Killmonger. Meanwhile, Killmonger kills Clow and takes his body to Wakanda. He is brought before the tribal elders, revealing his identity to be I'm struggling with this one. Ninjadaka.
Ninjadaka.
Yeah, he yells it, and so it's hard to,
Just yell it real fast.
pronounce.
Ninjadaka!
And claim the throne.
It's mine now.
Anywho, Killmonger challenges T'Challa to ritual combat where he kills Zuri, defeats T'Challa, and hurls him over a waterfall to his presumed death. Killmonger then ingests the heart-shaped herb and orders the rest incinerated, but Nakia extracts one first. Killmonger, supported by Wakabi and his army, prepares to distribute shipments of Wakanda weapons to operatives around the world.
Nakia, Shuri, and Ramonda and Ross flee to the Jabari tribe for aid. They find the comatose T'Challa rescued by the Jabari in repayment for sparing M'Baku's life. Healed by Nakia's herb, T'Challa returns to fight Killmonger, who dons his own nanotech suit similar to T'Challa's. Wakabi and his army fight Shuri, Nakia, and Dora Milaje.
Dora Milaje. There you go.
I wasn't sure if the L wasn't weird in Milaje. While Ross remotely pilots a jet and shoots down planes carrying the vibranium weapons, M'Baku and Jabari advance to reinforce T'Challa. Confronted by Okoye, Wakabi and his army stand down. Fighting in Wakanda's vibranium mine, T'Challa disrupts Killmonger's suit and stabs him. Killmonger refuses to be healed, choosing to die a free man rather than be incarcerated. T'Challa takes him to the waterfall where they fought, where Killmonger dies peacefully.
T'Challa establishes an outreach center at the building where N'Jobu died, to be run by Nakia and Shuri. In a mid-credit scene, T'Challa appears before the United Nations to reveal Wakanda's true nature to the world. With all due respect, what does a tiny country like you have to offer the world? Smile. In a post-credit scene, Shuri helps Bucky Barnes, who's surrounded by kids who are chanting, "White Wolf, White Wolf, White Wolf," with his recovery. So what happens now determines what happens to the rest of the world. So let's dive into the film's information and start asking our big questions about the movie. Black Panther is a 2018 American superhero film based on the Marvel Comics character of the same name, produced by Marvel Studios, distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. It is the 18th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Can you believe that we have done 18 of these Marvel movies over the past year and a half?
That's crazy.
It's insane is what it is. The film was directed by Ryan Coogler, who co-wrote the screenplay with Joe Robert Cole, and it stars Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa / Black Panther, alongside Michael B. Jordan, Lupita Nyong'o, Danny Gurria. I'm gonna butcher names now. My turn.
That's Martin Freeman is next,
and a bunch of other people. In Black Panther, T'Challa is crowned king of Wakanda following his father's death. But he's challenged by Killmonger, who plans to abandon the country's isolationist policies and begin a global revolution. It is the first Marvel Studios film with a black director and a predominantly black cast. It premiered in Los Angeles on January 29th, 2018, and was released theatrically in the United States on February 16th as part of Phase 3. Critics praise its direction, screenplay, acting, particularly that of Boseman, Jordan, and Wright, costume design, production value, soundtrack. Some criticize the computer-generated visual effects. We'll talk about the Tron ending at some point, I'm thinking. But many critics consider the film to be one of the best in the MCU, and it was also noted for its cultural significance. Organizations such as the National Board of Review and American Film Institute named Black Panther as one of its top 10 films of 2018. It grossed over $1.3 billion, that's billion with a B, worldwide and broke numerous box office records, becoming the highest grossing film directed by a black filmmaker, the 9th highest grossing film of all time, and the 3rd highest grossing film in the U.S. and Canada, and the 2nd highest grossing film of 2018. I think the first highest is probably Avengers Infinity War, which came out the same year. The film received numerous accolades with 7 nominations at the Academy Awards, including the first nomination for Best Picture for a superhero film, the first Academy Award win for an MCU film with wins for Best Costume Design, Best Original Score, Best Production Design. It also received 3 nominations at the Golden Globes, 2 wins at the 25th Screen Actor Guild Awards, and 3 wins at the Critics' Choice Awards from 12 nominations, among others. A sequel, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, is scheduled for release on July 8th, 2022. That's a year from now. While a television series set in Wakanda is in development for Disney+. So, here are my questions. Did you like this film?
Duh.
I was expecting some big thing. I was like, Ashby's taking a deep breath. I'm gonna let her roll.
No, I'm gonna let Eric take this one.
Honestly, rude. Kyle?
No, I did.
Okay.
I really liked it. Do you want me to go in depth a little bit with that? Because I typically do, but I'm known to ramble.
It's up to you.
I'll say what really worked great for me with this movie, and that's another question sort of, but a reason I really liked it was I saw this movie with you. I don't really know a ton about Africa. Like, I knew, you learn what you learn growing up in school or whatever else, but I've never been there. You have been there, and I give you, a little flack sometimes and say it was all Photoshop and you didn't really go, but you really did. You've seen the country firsthand. You've been there. You've seen the environment, the people that live there. You've been, in their society. And so seeing you and how you reacted to it gave me the impression that they did a really good job of representing that. And not necessarily every single part of it, but at least the accuracy or the accurate, whatever. Doing it, they did accuracy of representing at least what the country would look like in some aspects. And so I did like that. Another part that I really liked about it too is Black Panther's a character I really didn't know much about. Growing up watching, TV shows that we did and cartoons, he was not one that was represented well in any of that. I will say maybe he made an appearance at something. I don't want to discredit and say he didn't, but I don't remember it. And I definitely didn't remember much about him. I remember more so going to like toy stores or comic book shops and seeing him and knowing that he existed, along with a lot of other Marvel characters. I had no clue who they were. For me, this was another continuation of how Marvel was doing such a good job putting these movies out, where you have Guardians of the Galaxy, which were characters I really didn't know anything about. I knew a lot less about them than I did Black Panther, but I came out loving them. Same way with this. You left leaving this theater feeling like you just experienced something amazing that was different than all the other Marvel movies you had seen, especially where culture-wise, but also where it took place, and just the story that's more in depth than just the surface-level story of this movie.
Yes. So, first of all, I'm going to do a minor correction because I feel like we might get some flack if I don't.
Sure, please do.
Africa is a continent.
Sorry,
not
my
a
bad.
country.
It's multiple countries.
My bad.
Multiple countries.
Multiple...
And I know you didn't mean it that way.
Yes.
But,
right.
but
I talk faster than I think.
So I just wanted to
Lots of
clear that up
cultures,
just in
lots
case
of
someone's
languages.
Because I guarantee you we would have someone like, Africa's not a country.
Yeah,
And
Kyle's an idiot. Also, Wakanda's not real.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, also, Wakanda's not real.
Eric didn't go to Wakanda.
Look, I had to.
Or did I?
I had to look up if when they were doing the Falcon Winter Soldier TV show, I had to look up if Madripoor was a real place.
There's a lot of
know.
fake countries
Right,
in the MCU.
right, yeah.
Sokovia
Also-
is not a real country.
Also
Madripoor
had
is not
to
real.
look up, and we might get to this in fun facts, but obviously talking about how Africa as a continent has multiple countries, that means multiple political systems, languages, cultures, and so I had to look up what African language specifically they based the Wakandan language on. So that was, I did a lot of Googling watching this.
Yes. So to answer the question, yes, I love this film. At times, it's definitely, if it's not my favorite, it's number 2 in the MCU long list of MCU movies. It trades spots with Winter Soldier, just depending on the mood I'm in. I want to address a couple of things. One, what you said. Yes, I love this film because of how beautifully it depicted how the continent of Africa can be both in its wildlife and then even in some of its technological advances, because I think a lot of people have this view of Africa just being what they see in The Lion King, where it's just nothing but jungle, but there are huge cities in this continent in multiple countries. So I think they depicted both sides of that really well. But the thing that really I felt like just it's probably CGI. I don't know, but the ending sunset where they talk about how beautiful the sunset is in Wakanda, it's awesome for me because I mean, look at my phone home screen. It's the African sunset in Eswatini, or what I went to at the time was known as Swaziland, now known as Eswatini.
So you're saying it really looks like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's gorgeous.
That's awesome.
It's so beautiful, and that right there was just, it brought back memories. The same way The Lion King brought back memories in its own way. This movie was able to bring back memories, very positive memories of my time overseas. The other thing I want to address, I saw this movie back-to-back weekends. I saw opening weekend, then I went a week later. And the thing that I kind of loved, like, this is not an Avengers movie. It was not one of their big, it's not Captain America or Iron Man.
Sure.
It was a debut movie for Black Panther. So I'm thinking, well, normally you get to the movies, maybe 10 minutes to spare, 15 minutes. No, for this movie, it was packed out because for the first time in Marvel MCU history, the African American community, the Black community, had a superhero that represented them. So they packed the theater, and it was a long wait to get tickets. I was afraid it was going to be sold out, to the point where the next weekend, another buddy of mine wanted to watch it. Like, we need to get there at least half an hour early because the line's going to be out the door. And it was 2 weekends in a row. But it thrilled me to see them have representation, to see them to take ownership of a character, to the point where this character is not just a superhero in the MCU, but it's an icon. It's a cultural icon for a lot of people because he represents me.
Right.
The Wakanda Forever little hand signal is part of the cultural zeitgeist now. Look at me using words that you taught us.
I'm so proud.
Chef's kiss. Great job.
Zeitgeist.
So, I mean, I love this film on its own merits, but when you add in outside context, it really elevates it beyond more than just a superhero film. It's something that means a lot to a lot of people, to the point when I rewatch this, I get sad because Chadwick Boseman is just a treasure. I mean, he's just so good in this movie. He's so good in any movie he's in. And it saddens me because we're not going to get to see him in this role again. You get spoiled a little bit by the fact that, we had like 11 movies with Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth. You get spoiled by the fact that they were able to reprise their role over and over and over and over again in multiple film franchises over the course of the MCU. And Chadwick Boseman got four movies.
What was the other two?
He did Civil War. He did
Infinity
this one,
War.
and then Infinity War Endgame.
Sorry.
But he wasn't the primary focus in 3 of them.
Right.
So, like, I was, I really wanted to see the follow-up from this film in the sequel, and from what I understand, they're not going to recast the role, which I'm completely cool with.
Right.
But it does sadden me that we're not going to get any resolution because he was taken from us way too soon at the age of, I think, 40 years old from cancer. And
not to break in on you on that, but it's something that I do hope they at least figure out a way, and I feel like Marvel will, in order to pay respect to him in the proper way, to write off the character somehow. Like, I hope they do at least some sort of thing, like to at least acknowledge it, so it's not like he just vanishes and the world knows what happened. I will say, like, whenever, and not to relate it to necessarily to Fast and Furious, but it's similar in the way that they were in the middle of filming Fast 7 when Paul Walker passed away, and they had enough that they could complete the film, use his brothers, use, CGI to make it work. And then in the end, they go their separate ways and they at least kind of let that be. But here we are several movies later and they keep still referencing him even to the extent of his character driving up. Technically, in like the movie, you never see him; they don't fake it; it's him, but they reference that that's him pulling up in the driveway. And it almost makes you wonder, like, you got 2 movies left. Are you going to really do this or not? Like, it's starting to get to that point that it's a little like, honestly, I wish he was just gone at this point. Like, instead of, referencing that he still lives somewhere there.
Right.
But hopefully Marvel, and even if they reference that he's living or something, whatever, like, I just hope they handle it in a good way.
It's also tough because, like, the Paul Walker thing is very specific because you have a character in a franchise where the easiest and most plausible way is to kill him off is a car crash, but the actor died in a car crash. And so it would be really awful to write Brian out by him dying in a fiery crash. So they have to act like he's still alive, but they can't keep bringing him on screen, right? So like that particular instance is just really dicey. Where I think about like what they did with Carrie Fisher in the Star Wars movies, they did eventually kill Leia. And it was a little bit better because Carrie Fisher, died of medical complications, and they got permission from the family, and then her daughter, stood in for her. So like when the family's involved, I think it's a little different, but I don't know how. I don't know how they're going to do this in Wakanda Forever. I think not replacing him or recasting him is obviously the right move, but when you have to write a character off screen, it is difficult, right? They had to do it with Corey Monteith and Glee. They've had to do it before, and sometimes it's done well, and sometimes it's done not so well. And I think that what Marvel is very aware of, and I think what the cast and crew of Black Panther is very aware of, is, what Eric talked about with how much this franchise means and how much this character means to the Black community, for young Black kids to have a superhero that looks like them, and then for the man who represents that, for them to die suddenly. It wasn't sudden to his family. We realized after he passed that he had been sick, but it was sudden to us.
He had filmed these movies.
Sick, yes.
Sick.
I mean, like,
no one knew about it.
He was cranking out movies at the end, and I just can't imagine.
It really reminds me, not to bring everything back to Hamilton, but the idea of Hamilton writing like he was running out of time.
But to bring everything back to Hamilton.
But it reminds me of that because, like you said, he was churning out movies left and right. It's like, was he just trying to get as many movies as he can because he knew he was running out of time?
Right.
Is there, and not to like glaze over that and not to cut you off either, but is there a time period now where they know how far back? Like, was during this movie,
they
and
were
I heard he
saying
was
as far back as 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe before Civil War released, or I mean, possibly like right after he had filmed the scenes for Civil War. But they were saying he had suffered from it for about 4 years when he passed away last August.
So it's crazy to think, to me, like, and I thought about it last time while watching it again, is just to know everybody else there doesn't know, but he's battling this right now while he's doing this film, knowing how important it is. Not letting other people know. Who knows if he was going over treatments or anything like that during this whole process as well. And I looked into it a little bit too, and like, it's not one of those things where he just showed up and then went home, and did his treatments or whatever else. He was there, and so when even on times when he wasn't necessarily needing to be there, he was reading his lines to the other characters in the movie. Like, where when you have a big superhero movie, you don't necessarily have to be there for every scene, but any time that he was somewhat represented or anything else, he wanted to be there and be a part of this and make it the best it could be. So to know that how much effort he put into it to do this while still struggling with that, while no one else knew he was struggling with that.
Right.
It's just crazy to think about.
Well, 2 things. One, I do think Marvel will treat this with the utmost respect, obviously. There's a part of me that wishes they'll just be reflective of the real world and say, "Hey, T'Challa died of cancer," and like it was like he was able to battle so many things, but this was something he just, and that would just be reflective of Chadwick Boseman, and I like the mirror imagery there, because to a lot of people Chadwick Boseman is T'Challa or is Black Panther, so it would be neat to see them reflected their lives in that manner. But I'm interested to see how. Ooh, that was a weird noise. I'm interested to see how they're going to do it. And secondly, If I'm not mistaken, next month, in a few weeks, actually in August, Marvel's What If will be debuting on Disney Plus, and I believe Chadwick Boseman did record lines for that series.
He voiced T'Challa.
So, and there'll be, I know T'Challa. One of the what ifs is what if the Ravengers had abducted T'Challa instead of Peter Quill. So he will be voicing T'Challa one last time, and whenever those episodes come up, just get the tissues ready.
Sure.
It's going to be an emotional thing, I think. So,
it's one of those things too, and not to keep interrupting. Erica was watching it with me last night, and she was the one that first brought it up. It's like, it's crazy to think you're watching this right now, and all that's ahead, and to know that he's not here anymore. And then literally like 30 seconds after she said that, Stan Lee's cameo came on, and I was like, that's crazier too. That he had recorded so many ahead of time, but he's still there. But then to know, like, we've seen his last one, I think, at this point.
Yes.
And so to know, Stan Lee wasn't necessarily a character per se in all of this, but the history and the background he has behind creating all of this world and that we love, it's another thing that's just these people that, as we continue to go forward with these amazing movies, it stood out like as a heartbreaking moment to realize the true nature of watching these amazing things we love, and to realize that some of these people just aren't even here anymore to go any further.
What are some of your favorite scenes and or quotes? Excuse me.
I like the original challenge scene with M'Baku, because I also just absolutely love Winston Duke in this movie.
Yes.
I think this movie sort of woke a lot of people up to all that is Winston Duke, and he does such a great job of playing M'Baku, where he clearly has issues with the way the country is being run, right? And he comes out in this first challenge scene almost like a villain, right?
Sure.
And so then you're primed to just not like him. And then throughout the movie, as it unfolds, you realize that there's a lot of gray area with the Jabari and how they've been treated and how they isolated themselves. But then they let him have this sort of like humor, this dry humor, you know, where when he's like, you do not speak or I will feed you to my children. And he's like, just kidding, we are vegetarians.
And I love that they let it linger. They let it linger. And even the guards there, they don't break character. They're just very much like, obviously.
Just kidding, we're vegetarians.
We're vegetarians. And it's just so funny, you know? And then when Ross is trying to talk and they start barking at him, you know? Like, you don't get a say here, you know? And it's such a good scene. And I really, when I was rewatching it, I forgot, because when I look back on this movie, I think, especially once Infinity War came out and the Jabari tribe like stood in the war with all the other Wakandans, and you know that rift had kind of been healed, and so I look back on it and think of M'Baku as like an ally and funny, and you know, and I forgot that when we first see him in this movie, you're ready to not like him. Like he's set up as like the foil to T'Challa, and then we realize that the foil is actually Killmonger, right? Yeah. So anyway, I really love that first challenge scene, also because when Zuri says, you know, is there someone of royal blood or whatever who would like to challenge for, and like Shuri starts to raise her hand and everyone's like, even the queen's like, stop it, you know, and she's like, and then of course everyone at first is shocked because they think she's actually gonna challenge him. And she's like, can we just like get on with this? Corset is uncomfortable.
Really uncomfortable. Can we wrap it up and go home?
Oh my goodness.
So Shuri just had so many great one-liners. At the end of the movie, she when she says, when you said you would take me to California for the first time, I thought you meant Coachella.
Right, right. Or Disneyland.
Yes.
Yeah.
When she tells Martin Freeman's character, don't scare me like that, colonizer.
Yes.
You know, she's so great. And then we'll get to what worked the best in a little bit, but just Killmonger had some fantastic quotes.
Sure.
I'm going to read a couple of them. One of these is when he is, I cannot remember if it was like before the fight or during the fight, But he says, I lived my entire life waiting for this moment. I trained, I lied, I killed just to get here. I killed in America, Afghanistan, Iraq. I took life from my own brothers and sisters right here on this continent, and all this death just so I could kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, just
Michael B. Jordan, just like in this role.
Michael B. Jordan is always a win.
I mean, we talk about excellent casting every time we talk about Marvel, but this movie specifically, just they nailed it. Nailed it.
Can you believe that? A kid from Oakland walking around believing in fairy tales.
Yeah.
I mean, and then of course at the end when he dies, I think you had this on our script. Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors who jumped from ships because they knew death was better than bondage.
I cried.
How powerful is that?
I cried the first time I watched this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my goodness, he's so good.
And then also, like, I like the sort of like warrior heart that he brings to it. Like the idea that even though he wasn't raised in this culture or that he had such a different path because of his upbringing, but that he made himself into this warrior just like T'Challa, who was raised into it and born into it. And the respect that I think they end up feeling for one another at the end, even still being on opposing sides, like when they're fighting and T'Challa stabs him and he says, hell of a move. Yeah. Like, what?
Yeah.
He just killed you. Like, it's
respectful in its own way.
That relationship is just, and I know we'll get into it in like what worked best, but I feel like we talk so much about Marvel's villain problem, and here is a villain finally that is so multi-dimensional.
Yes. One scene that I really want to point out, and Kyle, I'll let you go.
No, you're good.
T'Challa's scene with his father.
The second one. The second soul scene.
When he's confronting him, and this is back when we thought this was part of the soul world. From the Soul Stone. How stupid were we? where he's trying to reconcile with the fact that his father did some wrong things. This is a scene I think whenever like this quote I think is not from that scene, but he said he killed his own brother and left a child behind with nothing. What kind of king? No. What kind of man does that?
Yeah.
And then I think he tells his father in the little soul word, you were wrong. All of you were wrong to turn your backs on the rest of the world. We let the fear of discovery stop us from doing what is right. No more. I cannot stay here with you. I cannot rest while he sits on the throne. He is a monster of our own making. I must take the mantle back. I must right these wrongs. And it's just, for him to, he's reconciling the fact that, okay, maybe just like we may realize that our history is not as clean as we'd like it to be. Our ancestors, the story of our lives and what came before us, we want it to be all spick and span. We want it to be, oh yeah, this is just, how it worked out, and it's, everything's nice and tidy. And no, I'm sure every ancestor we had going way, way back, all the way back, did some atrocious things that we are not proud of.
I think I'm distantly related to John Wilkes Booth, so I've got that going for me.
Honestly, not shocked.
Well, there you go.
I mean, who am I to say that Ashby's ancestor wouldn't take out the Republican sitting president? Anyway.
Buddy.
Anyway, I didn't say that out loud. Anyway, sorry.
Or into
Ashby.
a microphone.
Sorry, Ashby.
Ooh, we're going to have to cut that.
Will we? I think it's hilarious.
Edit mark here.
What's the timestamp on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't read numbers anymore. I can't pronounce names, and now I can't read numbers. Who knows?
Wow.
But just the fact that he's reconciling that his history is not as clean as he thought it was, and he wants to make it right. And I think that's something that we can relate to, knowing that, hey, our past, the people who came before us, were not perfect. They were not infallible,
Right.
as we like to sometimes look at them, as they were human who made mistakes, who were sinners in their own right. And sometimes the best we can do is just make sure we don't follow in their footsteps in that way. There's some things that we can be proud of.
Right.
There's other things that we need to try to fix because what they did was not right.
Well, I even think, even for ourselves, I notice that the older that I get, I think back to my younger self and where I felt very like, you know, that I was an okay, great person, whatever. And you look back and you're like, actually, no, like, you know, I was dumb, you know, in some things that I did and actions that I did. And it's one of those things you can really wreck your life by constantly living in remorse of those past moments and, you know, feeling horrible about the things that you may have said or done in your past. But then there's the part of it's like you can sit there and don't make a change, or you can literally just do better for the rest of your life and to be more aware of decisions you make, you know, conversations you have. And like I said, you know, we can look back at ancestors, which is definitely, you know, important to do and realize like, yo, no, they screwed up a lot on some stuff. But I realize too, and even in our own lives, we do the same thing, and to try to look at that as we take each day on to be aware of how we handle things. There's so many things that I've wanted to speak up on what you guys have been talking about, but I feel like it's more of the what worked best movie stuff or part of the movie. So I've like kind of held back, just to lighten it up a little bit too. One of my favorite scenes is when we are there with, and of course I'm gonna forget her name, his sister
Shuri.
Yes, just how smart she is, and just, you know, we don't know anything about her, at least I didn't know anything about her going into this, and you go in and just all the tech that she has made up, all the things that she is able to do. We're so used to Tony Stark and Iron Man doing what he does and the amazing things, but to see this in this whole other culture that you're not used to, like, first off, it's hidden from the whole world, so the world doesn't know about it either. But now you're here and you're in the first time you see her, it's not a learning process, it's a this is great. And I love how there's a scene there where she's got all the different suits lined up, where it's like two of them are just like the necklace like type things, and then there's his regular suit. It's like, yeah, there's my suit. And she's like, yeah, well, you know, it's old and everything else. And he's like, well, what's wrong with my suit? It works good. And she's, I don't remember the exact line, but she says, you have it?
I have it here because it's one of my transitions.
Sorry, but yeah.
How many times do I have to teach you? Just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that stood out to me so much to be like, you know what? Like, that's awesome to say that. It's a life thing in general, but just in that brief little moment of that, and just even in the little comments and how it foreshadows things where he's looking at all the other two options, where there's the one with the necklace that's all like big and gold,
ostentatious.
But it honestly reminds you somewhat of Black Panther, like just the, you know, what it would look like over top of a costume.
Right.
And then she's like, you know, that one catching your eye or whatever, and he's like, yeah, but
supposed to blend in.
Yeah, I think it's a little too much, and so then he chooses the other.
Sibling play too.
Oh, absolutely.
In that scene.
Yeah, but then I love when Killmonger comes later, and that's what he wants. Like he, you know, he doesn't necessarily have an option to choose.
He wants to stand out,
but that's the one he would choose. And I also love too, the art museum scene with him, where we get introduced to him.
Oh, a great introduction.
Yes.
And he's just so slick about everything he's doing, where he's asking this lady, he's specifically asked to meet with this lady, and he's asking her about all this stuff. But the thing is, you learn how smart he truly is. Like, this isn't something where he grew up, this is his heritage or background or whatever. He has spent tons of time doing research about this. It's not I wasn't able to grow up there, so I don't know nothing about it. No, he took his own time to figure this out, to know all this stuff. And I just, in your mind, you know, when he's asking about all these different pieces,
he already knows it.
He knows what every single one of
these
things are.
It's like a cat playing with its food.
It is, and I love how sleek that is, where he's just sitting there, and then the lady's like kind of getting all in his face, and he's like, "Oh, you don't even pay attention to, you know, what you're drinking or something like that."
You had all the security watching me since I walked in, which how on the nose is that? You know, a black man walks into what would be considered a white establishment, and of course, security's watching him the whole time.
Yep.
Right.
You know, it's very subtle, but it's true for a lot of people in this world. I love how she's like, well, this what, you know, whatever happened, and he's like, well, this is, you know, this is when your ancestor took it, but it's Wakandan.
Right.
And he's like, how do you think your ancestors got these? Did they pay a fair price, or did they take them just like they took everything else?
Right.
He's so smart. You mentioned Shuri as well, and when you see Shuri, you know, in her, I guess, lab for the first time, you immediately, like, there's no question, like, okay, she's, if not if not better, she's at least on par with Tony Stark.
Right.
Or
I would say better.
Bruce Banner. No,
I'm gonna
I would say
hot take better.
Yeah.
no, I would say better too. But just in
Right,
that first
right.
introduction,
Yes,
she's on
you're like,
par
wait a
with the
second.
greatest minds
Right.
in this universe.
Right. Because Tony Stark's like a 40, 50-year-old white dude that graduated like summa cum laude from MIT, right? But
And she's
Shuri's
like 18, 19,
16,
16
17?
maybe.
I think she's supposed to be pretty young.
Yeah.
Right?
This is not in this movie, but in Infinity War when they're talking about in
Right.
healing Vision, she's asking about the markup, and she's like, "Why didn't you just connect the lapses or whatever
Right.
consecutively or whatever?" And Bruce Banner's like,
Right.
"Because we didn't think of it." And she's like, "Well, I'm sure you tried your best."
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Which is interesting because I know that Wakanda as a culture, like as a people in a country, are supposed to be more technologically advanced in general, but Shuri specifically is clearly supposed to be the brightest among them, even at her age, which I think is really interesting. And we talk about young black boys being able to look at T'Challa and see themselves as a superhero, but like, let's not discount the idea that young black girls can look at Shuri and think, my gift and my talent and like my gift to the world can be being super smart, right? Like we
Absolutely.
do not have a lot of women, and specifically a lot of women and minorities in STEM, right? In engineering, mathematics, science. And so to be able to have this Hollywood ideal of that for those young girls is so important.
To the point where I think we're even seeing some of that like get corrected a little bit even this year. I know at the inauguration you had the young lady who the poet laureate
Amanda Gorman,
yes, who was just incredible.
Ugh.
And then we just recently we had the spelling bee, and the spelling bee was won by Zalia Avantgarde, who
14.
She's 14 from Louisiana, and this is something she does for fun. Like, she's a very talented athlete too. Like, she holds world records from
Right.
Sure.
Guinness for some of the things she can do with a basketball.
Right.
I mean, so I love seeing. I guess I feel like they've always been there, but now the spotlight's on them.
Right.
Like, they can shine a little more because the world's opening up where the opportunities were not always there for them to do so. To America and the world's discredit.
Right.
They are now able to step up and get the spotlight they deserve, and I think Shuri is a great role model of that.
And I was listening to a podcast yesterday or day before, and so I didn't fact check this, so I could be wrong. But they said that, to their knowledge, Shuri is supposedly the brightest, if it's at least one of the, if not the brightest people in the Marvel
Absolutely.
Yeah.
world. Overall, and they even said surpassing Tony Stark,
Absolutely.
Bruce Banner, all of them.
I would agree with that. And they actually have a in-universe book out called The Wakanda Files. I have not read it, but it's massive. It's huge, and I think it's like $50. But it's told from the perspective of Shuri, who is post Endgame, taking like all these notes that were left behind by Tony Stark and the Avengers, and like it's there to explain a lot of stuff in the MCU, but they're like, it's done from her perspective, and it seems like it's like a great informational book. I'd love for us to get it too, just so we can look
Right,
over it.
yeah.
Y'all want to pitch in?
Yeah, 100%.
Everyone
Also,
pitch in $20.
love her humor when she's like, "Great, another broken white boy for us to fix."
Which is a great callback to
Yes.
who?
Bucky Barnes.
Bucky Barnes,
The White Wolf.
The White Wolf.
Well,
My day one.
well, to jump into it and kind of keep this conversation going at the same time, we're talking about some of the things that work best.
Yes.
At that same time, and along with what you were just talking about with the spelling bee and everything else, I remember when this came out, first thing, I think I went to the comic book in Wilson. They were still there. I would go there nearly weekly on either like Friday or Saturday. And I went in and I was just picking up my books and looking around. And usually after a new movie comes out, especially like Superhero 1, there's people in there talking. There were more people in there than I'd ever seen in there, unless other than like a giant special event, but just on a regular day. And there was a lot of black people there that had seen it the night before that came in today wanting to know, who is this guy? This was an amazing movie. It was great. I loved it. It hit home for me so much. And I hadn't seen it yet. We didn't go on like Thursday night, I don't think. So I think it was the weekend when we saw it, the same weekend. but just the conversations that were happening in that store.
Right.
It had always been friendly and it had always been like good conversation. But the lady that ran the store was there talking like so in depth because people were literally like, okay, we saw the movie. How accurate is that? What are some books I can start reading now because of this? Like, I've never read comics before, but I want to know more.
Right.
And there were a lot of kids in there too that were like picking up, Black Panther books, and giant books and comic books, like individuals.
Well, I was looking for fun facts, and so one of the things I read as I was looking for that was, Director Ryan Coogler was introduced to Black Panther for the first time when he was 9 because he grew up in Oakland, which is a callback to, the film. And he went into a local comic book store and he said, I want to see a superhero that looks like me. And so the guy who ran the store gave him the Black Panther comics.
Yeah.
And so I think that's opening up comics for a lot of kids who saw this movie and was like, oh, not only is there someone who looks like me, but now I can read more, right?
Sure.
I can go find more of this. And I think that's really cool.
It was cool to see like some of the discussions too, because like I was able to join a conversation and stuff. It's it was a very opening area, but it was cool to sit back and just listen to what other people were saying. And I remember there was a guy talking with the lady that ran the store, and they were having like this deep, like in-depth conversation about just injustice in general, but especially even in like the comic world where like she was, they were talking about they didn't really ever know much about him, and he was trying to find out more and trying to do stuff. And she mentioned too, it's like, honestly, we just are getting to a point where they're recognizing women as being legitimate in general too. She said, because there's been times where I've been on like forums and people had questions, and so I was doing my best to answer those questions for them. And she's like, I'm not a genius, but I'm pretty smart with some of this comic stuff or whatever. She's like, but they did not want to hear anything I had to say because I was a woman.
Right.
Like, they immediately shut me down and said that, even some vulgar, like, horrible things. And she said, it's just at that point now where the world's evolving now.
Right.
And finally getting some stuff straight that should have been straight a long time ago.
Right.
And just in general, I don't know, it was just an amazing thing that this movie, just brought about conversations that needed to happen. And it was just in your normal comic book store, but you're having great in-depth conversations with other people. And I thought that was just amazing and that stood out in my memory from this movie.
For sure.
I also think it's interesting talking about sort of what worked best, but also like the politics and the social aspect of this is kind of what that woman was talking about, where it's funny to me that there are people who are always going to find something wrong with everything.
Sure.
And there are people who don't just maybe grasp the history of the inclusivity of comics, because there's always going to be people that are like, you're making it political. Like, why do we now have to have like, Muslim superheroes and LGBTQ superheroes? And it's like, this used to be like somewhere I could escape, and now everywhere I turn, you're trying to shove the social aspect down my throat. And it's like, I don't know what you think of, about the history of comics, but comics has always been, depending on who's making them, about including people and bringing in the political sort of like social issues of the day, right?
Yes.
So
like,
when you talk about Black Panther, you go back to what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were trying to do by creating the Black Panther. And it's not by accident that they happened upon a superhero who was called the Black Panther. They were creating the Black Panther in the 70s when the Black Panther Civil Rights Party was founded, like was very active. So like it started in 66 in Oakland. Again, it comes a lot comes back to Oakland, California. But the Black Panthers were a revolutionary sort of like social movement about Black nationalism and socialism and armed self-defense. And it was really about Black people in urban areas arming themselves against police brutality, right? And so the idea that like you could have a Black Panther movie that doesn't deal with social issues, that doesn't deal with political issues, it's been that since its inception as a comic, right? So when this movie came out and there were a few sort of like small segments of the comic community that were like, oh, I couldn't enjoy the movie because it was just so like political. And it was like, where have you been? Like,
For sure,
get
like,
out.
You know, did you like X-Men the animated series growing up? Because that's all this is.
it's
Like
all about
X-Men were
civil
created
rights,
because
yes.
of this. Mutants were created
Right.
because of
Captain
this.
America was created to
Right.
combat anti-fascism. I
Yes.
mean,
Right.
Like
Yes.
it's all been about this whole time.
The whole
entire
time.
time.
Yes.
Like where you been?
it's all connected, man.
Yes.
It's like the MCU. It's all connected.
Another thing that stood out to me when you guys were talking earlier too is about Michael B. Jordan's character. It reminds me almost a lot of his character in Creed. Not necessarily every bit of it, but it's a similar situation where he never really got to deal much with his dad because his dad died in the ring. And then the other part of his growing up where his mom, I'm not going into all of Creed. It's go watch it. It's good. But it's just a similarity of a guy that's having to learn his own history of things with this and to still do his best to proceed at this. And that's something we talked about in Baku, who was like, you wanted to see him as the villain at first, but all of a sudden you realize he's so much more than that. I think they do that with a lot of characters in this because Killmonger is the same way. There's parts of it where you're like, you know what? I totally get why you feel that way. And it was wrong, especially, and I love how they approached it. You talked about, too, about how T'Challa went and spoke with his dad and all the ancestors in that world and saying, how could you do this? To realize that the problems that happened, it wasn't just something he just flashed over. He acknowledged it even himself that, like, he deserves this chance. I, as the king, could just shut him down and send him away. But no, like, he deserves this. He knows the history of this. He knows what's right. He's got a good heart and does what's right. But the same way, people go about things sometimes the right way and sometimes the wrong way. And so you see where Killmonger, at least in multiple parts of this movie, he's not necessarily wrong in what he's doing. It's about how the decisions he goes about, but then especially later on, to the extent of what he wants to go and how he wants to handle things. Okay, that goes over the, crosses the line, does stuff. But there's those parts of it where you're like, I can kind of understand where this guy's coming from.
100%.
And like, I relate to this where I don't feel like it's wrong for him to be feeling this way.
Right. And like also Michael B. Jordan's acting specifically, and I can't remember right now the other guy who's in This Is Us who plays Ninjabu.
Ninjabu is it Forrest Whitaker?
No, he's Zuri.
I think Ninjabu actor.
What is his? He's in This Is Us.
Sterling K. Brown.
Sterling K. Brown. So
Yes.
the soul thing where Killmonger takes the heart-shaped herb, and you're sort of doing this soul searching, but you're also able to sort of like pierce the veil and talk to your ancestors. And the two of them in that scene where he, for the first time since his dad died, he gets to talk to him about what sort of trajectory that took his life on. And that scene specifically sort of makes you sort of come around to Killmonger, right? Because up until this point, he really has been sort of the prototypical villain to a certain extent. And we've just started to sort of understand that there might be more to the story with what Zuri has just told T'Challa. But seeing this little boy crying and then turning into a grown Killmonger, right? And then
who's crying as well.
Right, who's crying as well. And then, him talking about how, everyone dies. That's just what it's like around here. And then, Sterling K. Brown, kind of saying, well, look what I've done. Well, look what I've turned you into with my choices. And, them saying like, why can't they see me? Right. I'm right here, know? And it's just it's so good. And it really kind of flips his villainy like on its head. And that's when you start understanding like this massive gray area that I think makes really good villains. And then the other side of that coin is T'Challa having to look at himself and his father and his family and sort of say, wait a minute, are we the villain? Like, am I the villain? And I think that also makes for really good cinema, right? When no one is totally in the wrong and no one is totally in the right. And I think that's what makes this movie so good.
It's and I love how T'Challa ends up doing exactly what Killmonger wanted to do, just through a different way. Killmonger wanted to give resources back to the black community across the world, and T'Challa did exactly that at the end of the movie. Saw his point of view, just went about it a different way. Went about it without, killing and death and whatever. Went across. I love the idea that, like you said, this guy has a point. Are we the villain? I love that T'Challa sees that point of view as well, and it's like, there's a better way to do it, but you had the right idea. It's like, when you're in class and the teacher's like, you're on the right track.
Yeah. Something as well that, if it wasn't for the other podcast, I didn't pay so much attention to it, but Killmonger, the same way growing up, we talked a little bit about how he dug into the history of Wakanda and just his ancestors as well growing up. To the first time that you see him without his shirt on, you see a billion little bumps on him. Like, it's what seems like little bumps. Something about that is, it's a part of history where, they used it for different things. If they dealt with something, serious or something like that, it was like a memory. But for him, it was for every person he'd killed, he had done a mark on him. That reminds me of like Victor Zsasz in the Batman world. He does the same thing. It's a little bit creepier. But with this, he takes his shirt off and you realize, like, okay, whoa, this isn't some like, I'm going to, take on my heritage right now. This is like, this whole life has been this way leading up to this. And it's neat in the same way, not necessarily the fact that he killed all these people, marked himself for it, but to see all the other parts of like history or African history around, where you have like I know it's a proper term, but like the disc in people's lips. There's a certain part of that in African history, as well as like stretching your neck and doing other things like in African history. There's a lot of different things that they included in this movie. Didn't make necessarily a big idea. They made it subtle so that it includes the history of it, but
I
it
think
also
they used the tribes to bring in different cultural aspects
for sure
throughout the continent, which is interesting.
And it was a good way to bring that together, and it just stood out to me because it's not just, oh, look at this cool character, like he takes his shirt off, he looks more like something, a villain now, versus, or just even beyond a regular person because of all these marks and stuff. It just puts him in a different level. But to realize that's part of like history as well. It's not just some random thing he did. Like, it's just part of his wanting to know his history and taking that and adapting it to his life.
Right.
I have a what if question or an answer question, but I'm going to save it. But kind of similar on that.
Okay.
Sound. Is there anything else you want to talk about that worked the best?
I really love the Ross tie-in.
Yes.
I think Martin Freeman played this part perfectly. I think I also love all the memes that came out about him being the token white character, which I was just like, great, high five. But I think that doesn't work if you have an actor with too strong of a personality, right? He really needed to be the guy who sort of evolves as this ally, right? And so initially he's like, I'm running an op and you're messing it up for me, And he comes around at the end to being this guy who's just literally like, how can I help? What can I do? What do you need?
Absolutely.
And I love that journey for him in the background. And I think that Martin Freeman did a really good job of playing his part the way it needed to be played.
Well, in that sense, subverting expectations with not just him, but also the other white character in the movie, Ulysses Claw, who is historically the biggest Black Panther villain.
Right.
Okay. And they kill him off mid-movie.
Right.
Like, I really...
Yeah. In a very, like, unceremonial way.
Which, to me, submits just how good of a villain Killmonger, or how much of a threat Killmonger actually is. Like, I'm waiting for, these two to team up, and no, Killmonger's like, nah, I'm done with you.
He also honeypotted that poor woman and then shot her in the head.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, woo!
Yes.
Cold.
The one thing I will add too, and it's a little bit outside of it, but the way they introduced Black Panther, Marvel, I feel like, did a great job. Where with Civil War, they brought this character in where you get to know who he is. At least, an idea. First off, they go like extreme, where all of a sudden his dad dies, immediately jump into this character.
Origin story.
Yes. But they didn't take an entire movie to tell it to you. They included it in one brief thing that kind of made the entire movie for Civil War, and how they changed up what Civil War is versus comics versus a movie. But they do a great job of that, and just acknowledging Marvel in general. But they take a character that a lot of people don't necessarily know, I still think, regardless, it would have done amazing at the box office. I'm not trying to take that away from it. But there is that part of it where all of a sudden you're invested in this character already. You don't know a ton about him, especially where he comes from. You don't know anything really about that. Much of it at least.
Right.
But you just kind of
you get a brief glimpse of Wakanda at the end credit scene.
It's so brief, yeah.
Of Civil War.
Right.
But they do such a great job of putting that in there where all of a sudden you do want to know more.
Absolutely.
So like I said, not to take away from the box office part, but you left wanting to know, like, man, I'm excited to see that movie. And especially with that quick glimpse of Wakanda, you're like, I want to see this. This
Absolutely.
looks different. So I definitely think that they just do a great job of incorporating that to make you excited.
Last thing for me, you have it listed here. I don't think we've talked about it. Kendrick Lamar's soundtrack for this movie is fantastic, and
Chef's kiss.
I cannot say enough about it. Just
Honestly,
if you're a fan
listen
of
to it.
hip hop, rap, whatever,
Even if you're not,
go
give it a
listen
try.
to it because it's a banger.
It is a banger, as the kids these days say, a bop.
All right, so where does this movie rank in your ranking of MCU movies? And I'll go first. It's 1 or 2. I mean, right now it's 1 because we're talking about it.
Sure.
Right,
but it
right,
does,
right.
For me, it does not fall further than 2 in this current moment.
I feel like I always say like top 5.
Sure,
top
I was
10,
the same way.
right?
Yeah,
but I thought about it and I said top 6. But I think after rethinking about it, I think it is 6.
It is 6. What do you have in front of it? Just out of curiosity.
Civil War, Winter Soldier,
Anything with Sebastian Stan.
anything with Sebastian Stan, and then Black Panther, which also has Sebastian Stan.
Yeah.
So your
honestly,
top
let's
6
just-
movies
Honestly,
all have
like
Sebastian
now that
Stan.
I've seen it, Black Widow. To be honest, I mean, so like,
Haven't seen it
I
yet.
hadn't seen it yet.
honestly, I would actually put Captain America: The First Avenger behind this.
Oh.
Yeah, so I would say like
Behind
specifically
Black Widow or Black Panther?
behind Black Panther.
Okay.
So I would say like my top like 5 or 6 sort of like rotating would be like Winter Soldier, Black Panther, Black Widow, Civil War, and then probably Endgame.
Okay.
And then like Infinity War would maybe rotate in, and then like if I'm right, like you said, in the certain mood, then maybe it would be like Ragnarok or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, but Black Panther is definitely like towards the top of my list.
Kyle?
I know I'm always horrible at this. So my initial thought was top 5 last night. And then I was like, if I say top 5, they're going to be like, everything's your top 5. And I was like, well, top 10. But then
Everything's your top 10.
it is.
We've done 18 of these.
yeah.
All of them in
Yeah.
your top 10.
We
Yes.
shift them around sometimes.
That's how math works.
Yes. As we discussed earlier, I can't read numbers anymore. I would honestly say, especially if you're watching it today or like yesterday, I feel like I'd only seen it a couple of times because I don't feel like I've gone back and watched it much after seeing it initially in theaters. I loved it and enjoyed it. I didn't like leave not liking it. But I think it's one of those things too, like without watching it last night, I'd forgotten a lot about this movie. Like as it came back, I remembered. So I would definitely probably put it at least close to top 5 now. I feel like there's some connections, like with Captain America for me as like a child, that just that connection with the character makes me want to watch those. If I'm just seeing all 18 or however many 20 something sitting there, there's other ones I pick first just because of the characters or involvement in it. But if I'm thinking more of just original characters by themselves, this definitely goes up there. Like Guardians of the Galaxy is fun to watch and it's good. But now rewatching this one again and just remembering how much more there is to it than what I remembered, I definitely say top 5. I can't give it a number, but like it's in top 5.
Okay. What questions, or do you have any questions about this movie that's been left unanswered? And I can go ahead and start while I have it on my mind. This is not really an this question, just more of a what if or a
Right.
cool little character, continuity thing. Killmonger mentioned that he had killed in Iraq and in Afghanistan as part of, I guess, the U.S. Army or U.S. Armed Forces or whatever. Was he in Afghanistan when Tony Stark was in Afghanistan that sent him on his journey to becoming Iron Man? Was Eric Stevens fighting that war at that time or in that country?
Well, if you've watched the What If trailer, are we gonna? We did say we would do spoilers.
We did.
We've
but I haven't seen the What If trailer. so
What?
I know.
Oh my god! Are you lying to me?
I have not seen it.
Oh my god! Do you have ESP? Can you tell the future? Why do I keep hitting this? Sorry, people at home. Okay.
To disappoint you as well, I haven't seen it either.
Oh.
I think we'll probably watch it before we leave.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, if you want to spoil it, go ahead. Like, because this is going to come out after we've seen
What
it.
If trailer? Obviously, we've already talked about T'Challa being Star-Lord.
Basically.
Peggy Carter takes the serum. She's Captain America instead of Steve. There is a scene where Tony Stark, after being blown up, is rescued by the Black Panther, who removes his mask, and it is Eric Stevens.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a ton more, right?
Yeah.
And it's a teaser clip where you're seeing everything in like 2-second flashes. And it's meant to be that way to kind of overload you. But there's I mean, it is a lot. It's a lot.
And see, I hadn't seen it. Something clicked whenever you were talking about Eric Stevens, killing and having all the bumps on his body or whatever. And I was like, wait a minute. Afghanistan, that's where Tony Stark was. I was like, well, maybe there's a connection.
Sure.
Look at me. I could write for Marvel.
Oh, my gosh.
Okay, do y'all have any questions about this movie that has been left unanswered?
So I took this section, to sort of also do some, like, what if thinking. And, we just got... no spoilers for Loki, I will say, because that is the most recent TV show.
Kyle hasn't finished
it, so I won't spoil that particular one. But I think we can sort of surmise from what's floating around the internet, plus WandaVision,
the multiverse of madness,
and the multiverse of madness coming up, that the multiverse has kind of been like blasted wide open, right? And that the next phase of Marvel will be dealing with that. And
Secret Wars, maybe.
What if animated, right? So there's like all of these projects that are sort of going to be based around this whole idea of the multiverse, like sort of being open, like a giant waterfall of timelines. And so I thought, is there a possibility for Killmonger to come back in Black Panther 2, even though he is technically dead?
Honestly, like whenever I heard about Chadwick Boseman passing away last year, after while I mourned that for a while, and then my head started, well, how are they going to make this work? And it's like, is there a way for them to bring back Michael B. Jordan to take over, and have a redemptive arc to become a good guy, and the Black Panther, and then I thought about Shuri. That would be a great pivot as well. But I don't know. I'm all for more Michael B. Jordan in the MCU.
Right.
So whatever. I don't know if that will take place in Black Panther 2. Maybe. I don't know.
So we've got a big sort of like toss up right now with all these rumors going around, because they have started filming Wakanda Forever, and they've also announced that there's a Dora Milaje, I think, TV show
Disney Plus.
batted around for Disney Plus. But as recently as this week, I think, rumors started to swirl that maybe Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri, might not make it back for reasons. Might not be included.
Oh.
So, because she made some comments publicly about some things that I'm not going to get into.
Interesting.
And so it's like, okay, well, who's coming back? Who will take the mantle? Who's playing what? And then there were also rumors swirling for a really long time that the film was going to center around the Kingdom of Wakanda coming up against the Kingdom of the Lost City of Atlantis.
Ooh,
and then there have also been some casting rumors, and I can't remember the actress's name, but it is confirmed that she has been cast, and people were thinking that she might play Storm, who in the comics
marries
T'Challa. Sure. So does she have a part in it? And then if Nakia is coming back, Lupita Nyong'o, like there's so much that we don't know. So it's
Nakia is like sometimes a villain in the comics too, which could be an interesting pivot there.
I thought about the whole Michael B. Jordan thing last night while watching it in the end, and the only thing that makes me, and it's Marvel, I mean, it's comics, you can do whatever you want with it. The only thing that made me think about, because I did briefly think the same thing, like, well, they can save him. Like, we've already seen this, that they can come back, from the dead. But we love him because of what the scene was with T'Challa. Now, and I'm thinking this all through as I'm talking, but, like, if he does come back and T'Challa's not there, everyone else didn't see that side of it, so they don't necessarily know that. But also, there could be a timeline flash between, like, showing you a relationship with T'Challa and him if he did come back.
Right.
But I don't know. It's one of those things that you never know. Nobody's necessarily ever guaranteed to be dead in a movie like
Right.
this. Same way, like that was the only question I had was Claw or Cloud dead for sure? Because when you bring him up in a body bag, the only thing I could think about was the Dark Knight, where Joker gets brought in a body bag. 2 seconds later, he's awake killing people, and so there was that one initial part to me to be like, is that really him? Or is this some greater plan that really wasn't him? Because I'm sure they didn't give him like a proper burial. Like I'm sure they just did something horrible, whatever. But like that was a question I had. Is like, is he really gone? Like in the same way I feel like we talk about Red Skull. Is he gone? Like there's all these things.
Honestly, let's give Winston Duke his props.
Sure.
Let's do M'Baku, who if I'm
He
not,
is confirmed to come
he
back.
is confirmed. Let's just give him his flowers. Let him take over Wakanda. He deserves it. I think
Everyone will be vegetarian.
I think he has a moniker in the comics, but I don't think they used it because of the obvious possible racist connotations. I think he was like the Black Gorilla or something. So obviously they're not using that, but
The Jabari's tribal symbol is
Sure.
the gorilla.
Yeah,
So,
so they tied that in that way without giving him the name, which is
Right.
I think appropriate.
appropriate,
But
right?
yeah, just give M'Baku, let him just run things. Let him bark at people for 2 hours. I'll watch it.
So
You
funny.
mentioned the flowers. Like, are there any more?
No, they burned
Okay.
them all.
Well, so again, the multiverse
yeah,
just
so who knows?
flooded the gates
Sure.
wide open.
Honestly, you know what? Me and you could be Black Panther in the multiverse. I mean, who knows?
It was just a random question I thought about.
more like White Panther.
Oh yeah.
It's White Wolf. What? Wait, what?
What?
Most likely, it's like these 2 white fat guys come walking in. So
Of
Look,
course, they take
watch.
over everything.
Falcon Winter Soldier.
there's
guys.
no power, so they just sit down.
Look at you, spend a year in Wakanda, and you're the White Panther.
Yeah.
Actually,
Hey,
it's White Wolf.
Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Oh, any other questions that have been left unanswered? All right. Well, how many times do I have to teach you? Just because something works doesn't mean it can't be improved. So, with that said, let's slip on the Infinity Gauntlet. And let's share 6 fun facts and observations about the Black Panther, 1 for each Infinity Zone. We'll do 2 apiece. Kyle,
Yes.
you go first.
Production designer Hannah Beechler, is that how I'm going to pronounce that one? Said it was very important to both Coogler and herself that the history of Wakanda was represented in the set design. So the duo crafted over 10,000 years of history right down to what the street names would be. To subtle things you would never really pay attention to, it's actually well thought out and planned.
Nice. Ashby?
So I'm gonna do a terrible job of pronouncing this, but I told you earlier I looked up what the sort of real African dialect for the Wakanda language, like what was used, and it's Khoisan. Khoisan. It's that click language.
Yeah.
So it's like
I cannot pronounce it. I've seen it before.
Khoisan.
Coleslaw.
Coleslaw.
It's not,
Anyway.
It's not coleslaw.
No. But I just thought it was really interesting that they, obviously Wakanda isn't a real country, but they brought in as much as they could from the different cultures around Africa to ground it, and that was the language they decided to base it on.
Well,
Go
and
ahead.
interesting enough of that, Marvel didn't want Chadwick Boseman to use an accent originally, but Boseman pushed for it and said he felt strongly about it.
Right.
So-
That they would speak English with
Yep.
an accent. And I also think it's interesting that John Connie, who plays T'Chaka, he speaks in real life with a Xhosa dialect, so that it was almost like a nod to him as well.
Well, something that it made me want to think about on watching it. I didn't go in depth like you did, but the thing that made me think about it was when they transition scenes between different locations, they would often put up where that location was, and at first they would put it in that language written on the screen. That would do like a quick wipe over, and then would show it what it is in English. And so I didn't necessarily think so much about the language, but I read it and was like, I wonder if they made up a language for Wakanda, and they even made it their own alphabet up so much to do these scenes. So it's cool to know you did the research and actually it was a specific language. So
Yeah.
Absolutely. Number 3, the 3 cities Killmonger mentioned sending weapons to are tied to Doctor Strange. Killmonger says that he already has people on the ground in New York, London, and Hong Kong because they were not resisting his goals. Well, those 3 cities happen to be the 3 locations of the Sanctum Sanctorums in Doctor Strange. Wonder if that's done purposely or not.
nice.
Number 4.
Michael B. Jordan kept a journal while preparing for the role of Killmonger. It said he often does this with most of his roles in order to help keep him in the mindset of the character.
Okay.
I lost my place. I was going to read something up here. Boop, 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 boop. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige says that a Black Panther film had actually been in the works since Phase 1. So it was one of the first things they thought about in the MCU. And in fact, they hinted at Wakanda in Iron Man 2, which was the third film, right? Yes.
Yeah.
When Tony Stark is seen standing in front of a map of Africa and there's a pinpoint where Wakanda is. So it took them a while to get it off the ground, right? But it was already like day one sort of in the minds of the people who were planning out the phases.
All right, number 6. I couldn't go without a minor Community reference here.
Lord.
This is a very much a stretch, but in the commentary for the DVD, director Ryan Coogler revealed that Donald Glover, who plays Troy in Community, and also he's in the MCU as the guy who turns out to be the Prowler in Spider-Man Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
I think his name's Aaron Davis, I don't know. Anyway, he's Miles Morales' cousin. Uncle. Sorry, not cousin, uncle. Anyway, he revealed that Donald Glover wrote at least one of Shuri's jokes. So when they're calling for someone to challenge T'Challa's place on the throne, Shuri raises her hand, only to complain about her corset being too tight and asking for them to wrap it up. That was written by Donald Glover.
Nice.
So, very cool.
One extra fact, just to throw it in there because it does relate to the history, is that this isn't the first time that they tried to make a Black Panther movie.
Yes.
Wesley Snipes tried to get one made in 1992, and he even had a full completed script, but the project was never past the development stage. So they did try to do something way back when.
Cool. I am not the king of all podcasts. I am the king of What the What.
Wait, what?
Well, I would let you be king, sure.
Okay.
And I want to hear from all of our loyal subjects / listeners.
Does that mean Hunter's the queen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, 100%. So let's hear what our listeners had to say in our social media shout-outs. Kyle?
Yes.
Social media shout-outs?
We didn't have any.
Oh, no.
So that's what it was. It was quiet. Nobody said a thing.
Shame on y'all.
Guys.
Shame on you folks this week. You let us down. We're going to have to get back in. We're changing our schedule up somewhere. We're doing this on Saturdays and figuring out the best rotation for stuff. So you guys didn't catch it on a Friday, so we're going to have to start putting it out a little bit earlier. But we got some changes coming anyway for some great things.
Yes. And just as a reminder, we are approaching very quickly the 100th AMA episode. So ask us some questions. And we're going to try to go back to doing some video, especially with the AMA.
Absolutely.
So anyway, yeah.
Any questions?
Yep.
Well,
We'll
any family, friendly, differently, safe-ish questions.
Right.
That's focused on either the podcast or pop culture in general.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that we can also do some retrospective stuff. So if you're listening to this and you have some thoughts on Black Panther, let us know that too.
Yeah, we'll clue that in there.
Yeah.
Well, now,
Now.
more than ever, the illusions of division threaten our very existence. We all know the truth. More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe. Way to be disrespectful, Chadwick Boseman, guys.
Is that what was happening?
Yes.
I had no idea. I was just like...
A big thank you to Ricky Lyles for his contributions to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as I'm going to enjoy punching Kyle in the throat.
I started it, to be fair.
And but I can't hit you. And that year is pumped for the rest of our journey in
True
pop
feminism
culture.
dictates that you can hit
We are.
me.
That's fair. But the law, anyway. Anyway, our next episode is episode 100.
I can't. We've made it.
Which will be
I
coming
mean,
out in a couple
I
of
didn't
weeks.
make it this whole way. I started,
So you started halfway through.
Right.
Partial credit for you, Ashley.
You know.
And honestly, partial credit for you too, Kyle.
Yeah.
And partial credit for me because I've missed a couple episodes here or there.
Partial
fair.
credit for Hunter.
I think I've missed
Right.
3 episodes of the 100.
Look, we
I missed
all
the-
got the ball to the line together. You know
I
what I'm
missed
saying?
the
a team effort
I
here.
missed the parental.
We're all part of the
arguments.
tribe. You just talked about this.
I missed Guardians 2, and I missed Bring It On. So,
But it was all done in your house.
Bring It On was not done.
No,
in
that's
my
true.
house.
It was not.
That's true.
And nor was parental arguments.
Mm.
That
That's a
was
good
done in
point.
both of your houses. The only one that was done in my house that without me was Guardians 2.
That's fair.
So,
So you've only missed 2.
I've missed 3.
I don't know.
Bring
Your
it
house
on.
kind of counts.
Whatever.
Yeah, you were here in spirit.
Whatever. We're doing episode 100. It'll come out in a couple of weeks once we can sit down and figure out a time for it to release. And then we got some news about our upcoming revamping of or restructuring of our scheduling, and we'll talk about that on episode 100. But we'll hope you'll join us for that. Until next time, y'all want to say it with me? Wakanda forever! Stay as cool as the other side of the pillow. And we will see you next time on the What the What Show.
What the what?
Bye.
What are those?